Thank you. Well, I'm very honored to be here and quite humbled. I can't see any of you, so I'll just pretend like I'm talking to the first few people in the first row. I also have to pretend like I'm in a classroom, so if the ceiling starts to fall down, we'll pretend like we're in Pierce Hall at CMU, because that's my comfort zone, and we all like our comfort zones. So we'll just go with that, so play along with me. But I'm very humbled to be part of this TED Talk. I love using these in my class. I've exposed my students to them. I find them very informative and thought-provoking and really rich and insightful, and so I hope I can only live up to part of that. I feel like I have a tough act to follow with Tim and Jake, so laugh and clap as you feel you need to along the way. So you've all made some impressions about me. You're thinking, well, she's really not that funny yet. She's going to talk to us about identifying as white, so I hope I don't have to think too much. She told me she's going to challenge me. And that's what we do. The first 30 seconds that we meet someone, we start to size them up. We look at what they're wearing, what they're carrying, maybe what car they got out of, where they live. You know, we make assumptions about people and begin to kind of categorize them in our brain. And that's okay. That's human nature. It's when we begin to act on those that it becomes problematic. And we begin to make decisions about people based on what they look like, their exterior. Most noticeably our gender and color of skin. We try to make estimates and guesstimate what people, where they fit in, because we like to categorize people. And that's healthy in some ways. It becomes healthy when we, again, start to make decisions about people without actually getting to know them, their talents, their abilities, their ideas, their notions. The title of my talk is called Identifying as White. And what I want to do is first thank Bernadette, because not only did she let me into her class, she let me play around with her curriculum, which is kind of the guarded treasure of a faculty member. And she let me change weekly plans and revise them as we went along, and we were constantly kind of tweaking, because I inserted a theoretical framework into an existing class. So I thank her, and I'm indebted to her for that, because she opened up this journey that I then took with 6 students over the course of 6 years, and which started as my dissertation work and really has exploded into this amazing transformation of not only myself and how I think about my own identity, but the students that I work with. And I want to take you on that journey and tell you a few stories about some of the students. Race is so much more than the color of our skin. It's really the ideas that we bring to the table. It's the notions that we have about how to make decisions. When you work in environments that are diverse, we have a richness of ideas at the table. We have a richness of problem-solving skills. And so think about that as I kind of go through some of these stories, and I'll keep kind of going back to that and nail that. We are also very constructed by race, and race is power in this country. And that is something that we have created as a society. Race is socially constructed. It's not about the color of your skin. It's about power structures. It's about privilege. And those are tough notions for people to think about. They were extremely tough notions for my students to think about, because nobody, and I self-identify as white, wants to be told that they have white privilege. Well, I'm here to tell you, and I know, and I own it, that I have white privilege. It's what I do with that and what I don't do with that that makes it powerful, and or I can suppress it. I can't change the color of my skin, but we can work with that. And you'll hear some of the stories of how people did that. These students went through amazing transformations. And as you meet these students through my talk, they were 6 very ordinary community college students, scared to death that they probably walked into Bernadette's class first. And secondly, that there was another layer, having me in the class, and then I identified some to interview. So the whole notion is pretty scary for some of them. So they made amazing transformations, and it was not about changing the students, it was about changing their notion of what it meant to be white and the notion of race and power in our society and their role in perpetuating that or working with it. We heard the power of one, and keep thinking about that, because we are very powerful as ones. So I think one of the big challenges that the students had to first get over was, but I'm just one person, I work in this one little environment. No, you are one person, and you work in this one environment that can become this big environment. So think big about your environments. Again, my idea was not to change the students at all, but to challenge them, which then changed them, and they changed themselves and their own notion of their identity. I used a theoretical lens as the catalyst, which honestly meant nothing to my students. So what I was doing in the class at the beginning of the study meant nothing to them, and it became very powerful as they kind of worked through some of their issues. Think of your brain as a movie reel. So the other day I was looking through, not so long ago, we would take pictures to a photo place, a 1-hour photo place, and then you'd get your pictures and you'd also get your negatives. Well, when we wanted to see which picture it was, we'd look up in the picture, we'd hold our negatives up to light. Well, that's our brains. Our brains are these movie reels, and we've been imprinted from conversations we had at the dinner table, conversations in the cars, playgrounds, school, then on to high school and college classes. Now it's friends, families, coworkers. And those messages get imprinted over and over again. So think of your brain as a movie reel. And what I had to do is go back and begin to deconstruct some of those messages and say, where are these messages coming from? Why do I automatically go to this place when I see a person that looks like this? Or why do I automatically think this when I walk into this institution or this organization? And we began to challenge those. I had a young woman walk in about 2 years after I finished the study, and she said, Anne, I quit my job. And I knew full well that she was not in a financial position to be quitting her job. And I said, let's talk about this. And she said, I was on a search committee, and it was such an honor to be on the search committee. And we had all the interviews, and this individual who happened to be a woman of color went through all the interviews with all the different offices, and we got all the ranking sheets back, and we sent forth 2 candidates. The first woman far exceeded in all rankings the person behind them, and upper management decided to hire the second person. And I couldn't even believe it. So I went to my boss and I said, let's talk about this. I don't understand. There were, if you just look at, from a numerical perspective, what was going on here. And he said, we just didn't think it was a right fit. Well, she in her heart, and was so ashamed to think, I work for an organization that would do this, that was afraid to hire a woman of color. So she quit her job. And it was just a huge transformation for her. And it wasn't about it was about being in an environment where diversity is valued, but more importantly, being in an environment where you're not afraid to share ideas that might stretch people a little bit. And she felt like she wasn't in that environment, so it was very powerful for her. And she began to reconstruct that notion of race and how it played out in her organization. We need to think beyond diversity as quotas and tokenism. It's not about looking around the table and seeing, you could fill in the blank here. I have an Arab American, I have an African American, I have, an Indian person. That's not what diversity is about. Diversity is about working with people who are different from yourselves. And again, I started out by saying, I'm going to pretend like I'm in Pierce Hall. We like what's similar. We're attracted to what's similar, what brings us together. We also need to think, what's going to stretch me? How am I gonna move myself to another place? And we begin to ask ourselves those questions. It's about a wealth of ideas and diverse ideas. I had another student who, this was just monumental for him, but he worked in a factory in downtown Detroit and was a supervisor. And he was a supervisor for about 2 decades, and he came in one day to one of our interviews and said, you know what, Anne, I just had this epiphany last night and I couldn't sleep. And I said, what's going on? And he said, I have never in 2 decades promoted a person of color in my organization. And I said, tell me about that. What do you think's going on? And he said, we have this kind of imaginary ceiling. You get to a certain point, and then I know that they're not going to be successful because we don't have the infrastructure to actually help people be successful in my organization because we're so white. And I thought, wow, this is huge. And I said, what are you going to do about it? And he said, this is language, and if you met this individual, this is amazing. He said, I am going to begin to challenge that. I need to look at the culture of my organization. And I know that I probably can't change things company-wide, but I need to begin to change my organization. And I'm going to begin to look at that and talk to people. And I want to create an environment where people feel like they can get promoted, and people from all different races and creeds and genders. That's what I need to do in my organization. That's the power that I have as a supervisor, which was absolutely huge for him because on our first interview, he came down and he said, I'm kind of doing this because nobody else signed up. I'm not racist, but this is kind of a cool study. And we've probably all met people like that in our lives. So it was just amazing for him. And he started using language like, I don't even see how white my organization is until I started doing these analyses of my organization. And that's really the problem we have is whiteness is so ubiquitous in our society that we don't even see it. It's something that we really need to begin to think about. one of the issues and dilemmas that my students face, and I think that we face in the Mid-Michigan areas, are lack of diversity. And so that's why my talk is about race, but we need to think beyond just race. We need to think about diversity in age, in gender, in religion, in sexual orientation, every way that we identify, and then look at how those intersections of identity, because those are really powerful, and that's where we get powerful ideas, and that's how we create diversity, not just through race. There's a sociologist named Sam Richards who talks about empathy, which is the one thing that we all share, regardless of how we identify. So I want you to imagine a couple of things. Imagine you are a woman who's highly qualified for promotion, and you're overlooked for that promotion. Or imagine that you are a person of color, and you're sitting at a table where people are telling racist jokes. Or imagine that you're a child in school that cannot participate in a social event because of your economic conditions. I'm going to guess it doesn't feel good. Nobody wants to be marginalized because of an aspect of their identity. So we need to begin asking the critical questions of who is represented, how are issues of diversity addressed and discussed in my workplace. And my study was not about being politically correct. This talk is not about being politically correct. That's not what this is about. It's about asking tough questions. We can't hide behind ignorance. If you don't know, you need to ask. I want to leave you with a quote that one of my students said to me, which is very powerful to me. He said, "I am only one person, but I am the voice for many who have never explored what it means to be white. And I ask you, what are you afraid of?" Thank you.